We've got nerfs, we've got buffs, we've got Battlegrounds changes, new heroes, a lot of stuff to get through. Big patch incoming, including some big changes to cards for Constructed. Starting off with Dark Lair, instead of being a 3-mana 3/4 that refreshes 2-mana crystals, Dark Lair is now going to be a 2-mana 2/3 that refreshes a single mana crystal. So his stat line is changing, allowing you to potentially squeeze him out a little bit earlier, but you're not going to get nearly as much mana returned when you play Dark Lair, which is a big deal. And although Zoo is not necessarily running rampant in standard format, if you haven't been watching Wild format, there's a lot of people who've been complaining about Pain Warlock, Dark Lair Warlock. It's just doing crazy stuff between Flesh Giants and Molten Giants and a million other Pain synergies that are possible in Wild format. Dark Lair was really, really strong. And it's still been a good deck in Standard too. Zoo, honestly, Dark Lair Pain Zoo has been a bit under the radar as far as power level. It's better than most people probably realize. It recently has done very well in GM. So all in all, Dark Lair looks like a card that was trending in the wrong direction because that mana refresh was so strong, just allowing them to cheat out millions of things in a single turn sometimes. Between tour guides and pin flingers and all these other tools, you could just start playing 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in a turn with like 4 mana to start. So capping the mana refresh to 1 instead of 2 will definitely limit the ways that you can not only chain the refresh, so something like you can't hero power into the same amount of mana, that instantly cuts your ability to chain the refresh, but also just the total amount of mana available per ping, of course, or proc, or whatever it is, won't scale as high. So this does pull back a ton on Dark Lair's ability to be relevant. I actually think there's a chance this kind of kills the Pain Warlock style of play. I don't know if the payoffs are going to be there now without Dark Lair. There might still be some Flesh Giant stuff that's possible. It's going to be really hard to gauge the strength of this one. But I think this goes from being a really, really, dominant build around style card to being a barely playable card at this rate. I don't know if 1 mana crystal is just enough because of the way it hurts your hero power and other chain style cards. So Dark Lair, even though it goes to 2 mana, which is nice, I'm glad they buffed it while also nerfing it in a way, or at least, tried to balance its effect down to a relevant cost at 2 mana. That's cool, but I don't think it'll be quite enough for Dark Lair to remain a really meta-dominant card. I think this one probably falls off pretty hard. So next up here is Secret Passage for Rogue. Instead of replacing 5 cards in your hand like it used to do, it's now going to replace 4 cards in your hand. Still the same mana cost. And you know what? I don't think this kills Secret Passage like Dark Lair. I think Secret Passage still remains a really powerful tool for rogues of all sorts to just kind of dig through their deck and find an alternative line, whether that's finding a burst damage lethal out with some, last second eviscerates, or it's maybe just finding a good play in the mid game. Secret Passage worked both of those ways really well. And although, you're getting less options here, you're still getting new options. You're still seeing a lot of cards at 4. There are still some shenanigans possible with replacing your hand and things like Quest Rogue. So a lot of the applications for this card remain relevant. It's just pulled down a little bit in its power level, which is exactly what a nerf should look like. So, all of the decks that run Secret Passage get a tiny little bit weaker. The Secret Passage itself doesn't feel quite as strong as often because you're less likely to hit that crazy damage out, but it's still a good play. It's still a card that gets run. We just see the power level pulled down a little bit, which that's absolutely perfect for a nerf. And as far as whether this needed to be nerfed or not, whatever. I wasn't really calling for any nerfs, particularly in standard format. I thought the meta was pretty good spot, frankly, but this is fine. I think it's good. Rogue was good, and aggro rogue, stealth rogue sometimes were frustrating to play against because it's hard to interact with stealth, and if this limits their ability to kill you on occasion, then that sounds like a fine bonus to me. Next up here, Cabal Acolyte going from a 2/6 to a 2/4. Priest getting another nerf after Mindrender Elucia previously. And I really like this change. I thought Cabal Acolyte felt like a pretty tough card to play against. Not only is your opponent often swinging the board in some really favorable way, often in combination with Wave of Apathy, but not always. And then they swing the board, but then you also have to push through this 2/6 taunt, which is a really big body to deal with. A 2/6 stat line's a lot of stats that early in the game. But the 2/4 stat line is going to make this much, much easier to resolve for minion-based decks, particularly since you've just lost a minion, presumably. You're only going to have to punch like, 1 or 2 minions through this instead of like 3+ minions, or dedicate less damage-based removal to it, which is going to really help limit the swing turn potential of the Cabal Acolyte. So I'm happy to see this change. I think Cabal Acolyte remains a solid card. It's still that speed bump that gets in the way, disrupts your opponent's stuff. It has that potential upside to steal something really crazy strong with a Wave of Apathy. So I don't think this card becomes unplayable. I don't think it hurts Priest all that much, just a little bit, much like Secret Passage, which makes it a good change for the meta. Less frustrating moments, less crazy swings off the Cabal Acolyte, probably with the 4 health total here instead of 6. So I'm glad they went all the way down to 4 instead of some middle ground like 5. I think this is a nice change that keeps the card in a good spot without murdering it. Same for its deck and class, but just makes the game a little bit more palatable along the way. So now let's talk about some buffs. We got Archwitch Willow here getting moved to 8 mana from 9 mana. She lost some stats along the way, which I don't know why necessarily she needed to go from 7/7 to 5/5. I thought, frankly, an 8 mana 7/7 with this effect would still be fine. But 8 mana is a big deal. That allows you to do considerably more things the turn you play your Archwitch Willow. Whereas in the past, it felt like, man, you play Willow, that's your whole turn. If it whiffs, if it doesn't hit the right demon, you're just completely out of luck. You can't like follow up with a life tap or another breath, whatever it might be. In this case, you can life tap, you can another breath, you can do other reasonably okay things with your Archwitch Willow turn, which means you're not totally reliant on the demons that she summons to be your only impact on the turn. That's a big deal. Now, I mean, the fact that she's a 5/5 instead of a 7/7, you're hoping that most of the power level on the upside in Willow comes from the big demons that she summons. The challenge is still, though, that in standard format at the moment, we don't really have that many great big demons for Warlock. And maybe this is a setup for the next expansion where a couple other big demons will hit, and they don't want Willow to be too OP, but they clearly see the math isn't quite working out at 9 mana. So this is that halfway step to get us close to the point where Willow's supposed to be good without making her crazy overpowered in the meantime. So I'll take it. I still wish she was a 7/7 for now. I still don't think Willow's going to be awesome. We've, played her. She worked okay. We made a deck that was at least somewhat viable. We won some games, etc. At 8 mana, maybe she's less hopeless. Still not going to be a fantastic card. That said, I think there's potential here, so keep an upside on Willow. She's not going to suddenly dive into the meta at 8 mana right now, but in the future, this sets her up for a modicum of success. And then our next buff here is Totem Goliath. Now suddenly a 5/5 minion instead of a 4/5, and his overload is pulled down to 1 instead of 2. And that's a cool change for Totem Goliath. This card did feel a little bit awkward to play, I'll be honest. It felt like the swing on your turn 5 wasn't big enough to make the overload worth it. You'd just be sitting there, you couldn't do the things you wanted, like Bloodlust on the following turn. In particular, this opens up that really nice 6 mana Bloodlust option. You've overloaded for 1, that leaves you at 5 for Bloodlust on turn 6 as a natural curve follow-up, which makes the Totem Goliath pretty sneaky if your opponent kills the bottom half. And the higher stats on the front half of Totem Goliath, of course, make it better if your opponent doesn't kill the Totem Goliath. So all in all here, you've got a change that helps this card a lot in its 2 primary directions, whether you're killing it or whether it's staying alive. And it's just a less mana commitment overall. And Shaman certainly needs some buffs right now. I don't know if this is enough to suddenly make Shaman really good, but small changes like this will help over the course of time to bring Shaman back up to the level that all the other classes seem to be at right now. So I would have liked to see Shaman get a couple more changes maybe, make some archetype work, whether that's Totem Shaman or not, it's fine. But again, this might be set up for later where it's like, okay, we've got this good Totem Shaman core coming. It's going to be more mid-rangey. It's going to be strong. Totem Goliath's a key part of that. Let's make it work. Now, as it stands at the moment, Totem Goliath, Totem Shaman aren't especially popular decks. Of course, they're not big meta relevant decks, but I mean, I could see Totem Shaman creeping up a little bit in the meta thanks to Totem Goliath. The things are getting pulled down. I don't think it ever becomes a tier 1 thing right now, but as it creep into high tier 3, low tier 2 with Totem Goliath changes, maybe it does. I think there are occasionally those Bloodlust outs that give this deck those couple extra wins here and there, which boost the win rate enough to make it a little bit more attention worthy in the meta. So I like this change a lot. I think it's cool for Totem Goliath. I like this card a lot. I just want it to be a good card. So happy to see both this one and Willow changed in some positive ways. All right, so now let's move over to the Battlegrounds side of things. We've got a couple significant changes and then a few new heroes, which are obviously a big deal. First and foremost, Micro Mummy being added to Battlegrounds at Tier 1. It will be replacing Mecharoo. So Mecharoo's gone, Micro Mummy's in. And as you can see, that is just a strict upgrade for mechs. Micro Mummy is everything Mecharoo was and way more, not only a higher base health total here as a 1-2 instead of a 1-1 with the same 1-1 on the back half, but also you've got this buff upside where he's giving a friendly minion +1 attack, which means it's going to scale a little bit better into your mid game. And of course, Golden Micro Mummy giving a minion +2 attack. I mean, that's equivalent to like Cobalt Scalebane, which is a tier 4 card, just with less stats. So ultimately, this is a much, much better early game minion for the mech package. Micro Mummy felt like it was almost impossible to play. Mecharoo felt almost impossible to play. Micro Mummy, I think, is a card you're not going to be too sad to carry for a while. It's going to be buffing things like your Deflecto bot, Divine Shields. It's going to hit every once in a while. You're like, yes, that's amazing. And just that buff means that it's investing into your future boards, which is really, really cool. So it's passing back, maybe 4, 6, 8 attack for later, which is nice as a stopgap minion along the way. So, and still, doing all the things that Mecharoo did with Death Rattle procs, etc. That said, I think mechs get a nice little boost here. It's still just a tier 1 minion, so it's not going to rock the world. It's not going to make mech suddenly the best build. I don't think anything like that's going to happen, but this is a good change for Battlegrounds in general. Mecharoo was kind of a boring minion. Micro Mummy has a lot more interesting ways to play around and a lot more decisions to make with this one. So excited to see Micro Mummy added. This was a nice little freebie. Also here we've got Pack Leader getting nerfed. It was recently moved to tier 2 in case you missed that. Since then, beasts have been really, really strong, particularly for me when I play. Beasts have been my go-to. Getting that early Pack Leader can really help define your build. So Pack Leader is going from a 3-3 down to a 2-3, and the attack buff is going from 3 to 2. So not only weaker stats early, but also less upside long-term. And I mean, naturally, that's a significant change, a 33% hit to every minion that you play following this up. As far as like breakpoints are concerned, it's really hard to guess how often that's going to matter. In some cases, the minions were so big off the Pack Leader that they were kind of taking great trades anyway. So there may be instances where the +2 attack doesn't matter all that much. But, for cards like Cave Hydra, you always want as much attack as possible. For your Rat Packs, that costs you an extra 1-1 off of your Pack Leader, which then costs you another extra boost because the minions that die aren't getting buffed as much by the Pack Leader. So all in all, it does start to add up over time. And by the time you get to the mid to late game, those 1 attacks added up over 4 or 5 minions, or any kind of time you're tripling something and getting it buffed 3 times, it's going to matter. And there are going to be things that don't die that would have died in the past. So certainly a nerf with significance and weight, and it will pull beasts down just a little bit. That said, with Mama Bear at tier 5 now, a lot of the times beasts are pushing to tier 5 with Mama Bear so fast that they're ditching the Pack Leaders pretty early. For late game beast builds, you're not even really looking for any kind of token buff style. You're going for Macaw and you're doing Goldrin Death Rattle stuff. So I don't think this necessarily hurts the late game dominance of beasts. It's just going to make it harder to get there. So they're still, if they hit that, full beast package, Macaw, etc., they're still going to be dominating lobbies in many cases. But if they can't get there, then it's just harder to pull that off. So you will see beasts be less consistent, but perhaps just as strong in the late game. So all in all, probably a fine change. I'm not a Battlegrounds expert these days. I play a little bit off stream here and there, but I think this will pull beasts to a spot where it's probably not the go-to number 1, as it has been for me at least lately. All right, so some new heroes coming in as well. Scholomance themed heroes, essentially, starting off with Lord Barov and his 1 gold hero power, Friendly Wager. This one's crazy. Guess which player will win their next combat. If they win, you get 3 coins. So basically, it's going to show you 2 people who are fighting this round. You're going to guess which one's going to win. If you get it right, you get 3 coins back. So a net gain of 2 gold if you guess correctly, a net loss of 1 if you get it incorrect. And what that means is, on average, you're going to gain gold over the course of the game, even if it's just randomly 50-50 you're going to win more often than not. And I think you will be able to influence this quite often. In many cases, you'll see a guy that's, first place in the lobby against somebody who's last place in the lobby, and it's going to be like, oh, well, definitely the first place guy's going to win. He's won 8 in a row, and it's going to be obvious, and you're going to get some nice coins back. You might also be able to pick some unsuspecting ones. It's like, oh, this guy just tiered up. He didn't develop his board. Oh, this guy didn't tier up. He must have bought a bunch of minions and gotten stronger. I'm going to take the guy who's maybe not ahead in health, but I think has a higher chance to win. So if you're paying attention, you know your lobby really well. I actually think this will result in a ton of gold. And of course, gold bonuses are really nice in Battlegrounds. They just allow you more flexibility, more options. You can cheese into minions. So, and because they're coins in hand, it's not just like gold being added to your gold total. That means you can save them up over time. You can use them at key moments. So we have, other heroes that are already doing that with like Sky General Crag, and that's pretty important strategy to get that 10 gold boost. If you're getting the 6, 8, 9, whatever gold over the course of the first part of the game, and you can use that all at once, you're basically like another hero with future upsides as well. Now, of course, you're taking some risk. You're spending that 1 gold early, and that could limit you a lot. It's going to be interesting to find out when the right time to press this button is, because it's not free. That's going to be hard. It's probably going to take skilled players to know how to utilize that well. It may hurt you so much in the early game that it might not be worth it. It's basically impossible for me to envision how good this kind of hero is going to be. But, I think people are going to get the guesses right more often than not, which means there's some real potential here for Lord Barov. And all that said, almost regardless, I think this hero is going to be stupidly fun to watch and play as you just stack up a ton of coins in hand. So I'm excited to try Lord Barov. I think he's got a chance to be solid, probably not, tier 1 kind of hero, but nonetheless, a really fun and good one. Next appears Forest Warden Omu, another gold-based hero power here. Everbloom, it reads, after you upgrade Bob's Tavern, gain 2 gold this turn only. So way less risky, more consistent way to gain gold. But unlike the coins that get added to your hand, this is gold just added into your tray for a single turn, which does make it far less flexible and far less spiky. But nonetheless, in many cases, it might give you the opportunity to roll on your new tier to find higher quality minions more reliably and sooner. Also, just might give you enough gold to buy stuff that you wouldn't otherwise be able to buy while still upgrading. So you want to upgrade and play that golden minion, but you also want to buy something to buy that golden, or to buy that triple. That's possible with Everbloom, where it might not be with a normal hero. So you do see some natural upsides here. That said, I don't know if the gold here is going to be targeted enough or controlled enough to make the big swings and the big impacts. Like some games, yes, I think it'll line up perfectly and it'll open you up for opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. I think there's going to be other games where you would just naturally upgrade and you might not have anything to do with that 2 gold anyway. You're just buying, a moderate minion upgrade, or you're just rolling an extra time and you didn't hit what you needed. So I am a little bit worried about the kind of spike ability of Everbloom or the swing potential of this card. I don't know that it adds enough right away, with the gold being limited to that same turn. It's not like you're able to bank it and do really cool stuff with it. You're just kind of stuck with what you've got. That said, gold is gold, and free gold is nice, and this is better in many ways than something like Bartendotron, if you think about it, as far as like raw gold efficiency is concerned. So I'm intrigued to see how Omu works. And again, I'm not an expert enough to tell you whether this is going to be good or bad. Just keep an eye on it. Just kind of talking about how it works and how I envision it more than making an assessment here for Omu. And then finally, we've got Jandis Barov, swap, lock, and shop it. 0 gold hero power, and it swaps a friendly non-golden minion with a random one in Bob's Tavern. So you have a little leftover buff card, you got a Defender of Argus you just used, you can swap that Argus with something random from Bob's Tavern and hopefully high roll into some higher stats to finish off your board slot there. And that's really the only way I know how to use this hero power. I've been thinking about this one a little bit. I don't really know what to do with it. I guess in the early game, you can do things like swap your 1/1 token off of your Murloc Tidehunter for a 2/4 taunt or something. That'd be really cool. I'm not clear here if you get to replay the minion that you're swapping or if it's just added to your board automatically. That certainly has some big differences, because you might want to realize the battle cry off the minion you swapped into. You may not in the case of the Vulgar Homunculus, like I just talked about. So I don't even really know the function of this one exactly yet. I have to see this in action. I think it might just move to your board as opposed to being added to your hand, which on average is probably worse because you'll hit battle cries that you want to utilize in many cases. But I think the randomness of this is a problem. Like, I think it might offer you a nice power spike in the early game with tokens, you know, half your games. But in the late game in particular, I'm just not sure how exactly to use this one. Maybe a build that cares about cycling things, or just I don't know. It's just random stuff just isn't all that good in Battlegrounds. So I'm a little bit stuck on this one. If you guys see a great way to utilize this, let me know. I'm also not sure why it specifies non-golden minion that you have to swap. What if you want to swap a golden minion? I don't understand why you can't swap a golden minion. A lot of times you'll have like 3, tripled buff cards, whatever, a mug or something that you want to swap away, and this doesn't let you. I don't really understand that either. Maybe there's some technical reason for that or something I'm not envisioning. I wouldn't assume the swap implied that the minion I got would end up being golden, so that's not a limitation. So I'm a little bit lost on what Jandis is all about, so please share your thoughts on this one. How are we going to use this one? How is it going to be good? For right now, it just seems a little bit too random. I don't think the upsides are there consistently enough or often enough for swap, lock, and shop it to be amazing. But I'm ready for somebody to enlighten me on the ways of Jandis Bear Off, because I'd love to play a fun, new, awesome, powerful hero. And there you go, folks. That is it, I think, for all of the changes coming with this patch. A surprising amount of stuff. Some big standard changes. Tons of new stuff for Battlegrounds. This is going to be exciting. We're going to have a new game to play in both modes, which is always really fun. Particularly excited to try out Archwitch Willow and Totem Goliath, see if they're good. What do you guys think about these nerfs and buffs and changes? Are they going to make the game better or worse? Do you think it's the right time? Do you think we needed buffs? Share all those thoughts and discussion in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.